Two groups of dieters were offered large bowls of chocolates by the researchers in disguise of a taste test and were asked to eat as much as they like. The experimenters weighed the bowls later. The results? The first group had eaten on an average 70 grams, which is equivalent to around 15 Hershey's Kisses, and the second group ate only 28 grams, which is 6 Hershey's Kisses. What made the difference? The second group of women were given a special message prior to the experiment. The message was a statement to induce a feeling of self-compassion. We'll look at the complete experiment and the message that were given to the women, which helped them exercise more self-control over their cravings. But first, let me ask you this. What was your response to the last time you failed at something? If the answer is self-criticism, shame, or guilt, don't worry, you're not alone. But this approach of self-criticism is not only useless, but it hinders our progress in the long run. Let's look at why, even though it feels like self-criticism motivates us, it actually makes our progress more difficult and it makes it unlikely that we stick to our goals in the long run. And when things get difficult, what can we start to do in order to overcome it? Most of us have this default tendency of being these harsh critiques of ourselves. It feels like a natural way of operating. At least it did for me. For as long as I can remember, I have had this harsh and critical way of looking at my setbacks or even life in general. A failure in anything would mean a definitive dent at my sense of personal value. The reason why we are so critical of ourselves is that we think that we need this rigid coach like figure to motivate us. And if he's not there, we'll become lazy or stop improving. But when we experience a setback and we criticize ourselves, it only leads to more guilt and shame with regards to the failure. And it makes looking at our mistakes even more painful and making amends even more difficult. So we avoid looking at our mistakes, which just leads to more setbacks in the long run. A study in Carleton University discovered that students who were more critical on themselves for procrastinating on the first exam were more likely to procrastinate on the final exams than the students who forgave themselves. The students who responded with forgiveness were more likely to take accountability of their actions and learn from their mistakes. If someone were to tell me around 4 years ago about self compassion, I'd most probably dismiss it by thinking that I'd rather use effort, willpower, motivation rather than being kind to myself. I just wouldn't be able to digest the fact that compassion can be a tool for progressing in my pursuits. Thankfully, somewhere around the part, I realized that living self critically is a very toxic way to approach life. In fact, a study published in the Journal of Psychology and Psychotherapy found self criticism as the only significant factor in depression. I read a lot and I'm grateful for coming across some beautiful books like The Compassionate Mind and Radical Compassion, which changed my entire view on self criticism. And from there, I started to apply and practice compassion in my daily life. But what even is compassion and how does it help? There are three elements to compassion. The first one is a sense of kindness towards oneself. The second, an awareness of emotions or suffering. The third is a sense of common humanity. I've put that in a very nerdy way, but try to understand it with a concrete example. Imagine a kid you know whom you love a lot. He or she comes to you with a painting and tells you with watery eyes that they got made fun of in school for making this painting. Would you tell them that they are a loser for making something like that, or there is something wrong with them. A compassionate approach would be to say something like, I know it sucks to be made fun of, and it's natural to feel sad, but at least you tried your best to make this. An amazing test that I found for self compassion is that if you won't say it to your kid, don't say it to yourself. It's also important to understand what self compassion is not. It's not an excuse for half assing things. The approach that I have found the most healthy is to give efforts to the best of my capability, and on if someday because of some reason like sickness, laziness, or even that I forget, I'm not able to take action. Instead of criticizing myself and telling myself that I'm a piece of shit, I'll never make it, I try to be more compassionate with myself and think that how can this be avoided the next time I face a similar situation. Remember the research I mentioned in the beginning of the video? It went like this. All the women were asked to eat a full donut within 4 minutes while watching TV and drink a glass full of water to make them feel uncomfortably full, all in the name of science. Then the group A women were given a compassionate message which went like this. You might wonder why we picked donuts to use in the study. It's because people sometimes eat unhealthy, sweet foods while they watch TV. We thought it would be more like the real world to have people eat a dessert or junk food. But several people have told me that they feel bad about eating donuts in the study. So I hope you won't be hard on yourself. Everyone eats unhealthily sometimes, and everyone in this study eats this stuff. So I don't think there's any reason to feel really bad about it. This little amount of food doesn't really matter anyway. Just wait a second, I'll bring you the questionnaire. Notice the elements of compassion in the message. The other group received no such message, and the results spoke of the power of a simple compassionate message. Like I mentioned earlier, the woman who received a compassionate message ate only 28 grams of chocolate, while the group of women who received no such message ate a whopping 70 grams of chocolate. So, if a single compassionate message can help the dieting woman in such an impressive way to exercise control over their cravings, imagine what a life full of being compassionate to yourself can do to not just your goals and progress, but also to your well being and self esteem. In the beginning, while getting started with compassion, it might feel difficult as we've been critical of ourselves our entire life. The loophole I've found is that we can even bring compassion into that by understanding that we've always been self critical. It's only justified that compassion is a bit more awkward initially. In the end, it's just us in there. Might as well make it a better place to live.
What's in it for me?
Summary. Although self criticism seems like it motivates us, it acts as an hindrance to progress and is a major factor in depression. Self compassion, especially after a setback, but even as a general mindset, is an amazing way to tackle feelings of shame and guilt and keep you on track. The three elements of compassion are kindness, common humanity, and an awareness of suffering and emotion. The goal we are trying to reach, to have a compassionate relationship with ourselves, to make our journey more enjoyable and more effective. The concrete action steps that I think would help. After each setback, notice your tendency to criticize yourself. Simply try to replace the criticism with a compassion. The not so concrete action step. Try being more compassionate to yourself in general throughout the day. The principle behind it is to treat yourself like you would treat your own child. So, if you've made it this far, I'd love to know your thoughts on how, if self criticism affects you, and what are your thoughts on self compassion down in the comments.